I can still see that Thanksgiving night as if it happened yesterday. The table was full: roasted turkey, steaming mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce glistening under the soft glow of the chandelier. I had paid for it all. Just like I'd paid the electricity bills, the groceries, and even my mother's so-called medical expenses. I thought I was doing the right thing, being the responsible daughter. But then, just as I reached for a slice of turkey, my father stood, tapped his wine glass, and announced words that carved into me like a knife. "Ruby, it's time for you to leave this house. You're nothing but a leech." A leech. Me. The one holding this family together? That night I realized the truth. I was never family to them, just a wallet they could drain. My name is Ruby, and for most of my life, I believed that family came before everything. I was raised to think that sacrifice was love, and that if you gave enough of yourself, the people you loved would appreciate you in return. That belief shaped every decision I made, and it nearly destroyed me. You see, I grew up in a modest home on the outskirts of Portland. We weren't wealthy, not even close, but we got by. My parents, Frank and Margaret, liked to remind me of how tight things were, how every dollar counted, and how lucky we were whenever I pitched in. At first, it felt normal. I was the oldest child, the responsible one. I thought it was my duty. When I got my first job after college, I was proud of myself. I was working full-time at a small accounting firm, nothing glamorous, but enough to cover my own bills and help my family. And help quickly became support. It started with the little things: groceries here, gas money there. But before I knew it, I was paying the electric bill every month. Then the water. Then cable, internet, insurance, even medical expenses for my mom. My parents always had a way of making it sound like an emergency. "Ruby, the power's about to get shut off. Can you cover it?" Or, "Sweetheart, your mom isn't feeling well. We need money for her doctor's appointment." And of course, I said yes. I always said yes. I told myself, this is family. This is what you do for family. But what I didn't realize was that, with every bill I paid, the balance of power shifted. My role in the family was no longer daughter, but provider. And they got comfortable, too comfortable, living off my sacrifices. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they treated me. My father, Frank, had a sharp tongue and an ego bigger than our entire neighborhood. He liked to act like the man of the house, even though he hadn't held down a stable job in years. He always had some new scheme in mind: buying old cars to flip, investing in stocks, or worse, gambling. And every time his plans fell apart, guess who they leaned on to clean up the mess? Me. My mother, Margaret, was gentler on the surface. She had this frail, soft-spoken demeanor that made people feel sorry for her. But underneath, she was manipulative in her own way. She knew how to pull on my heartstrings, how to make me feel guilty for even questioning her. "Ruby, you know how sick I am," she would whisper, clutching her chest dramatically. "I don't know how much time I have left." Those words broke me every time. And then there was my younger sister, Lily. She was 6 years younger than me, still in school when I first started working. Unlike my parents, Lily never asked me for anything. In fact, she often apologized for the way they leaned on me. She'd say, "Ruby, I don't know how you do it. If it were me, I'd have snapped by now." I think that's what kept me going sometimes, the hope that at least one person in the family saw my efforts for what they were. On the outside, people thought I was devoted, loyal, maybe even blessed to have such a close family. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. I worked long hours, only to come home to complaints. If I was late with a payment, even by a day, my father would snap, "What good are you if you can't even keep the lights on?" My mother would sigh dramatically and mutter about her poor health. And Lily would look at me with eyes full of pity, and that was somehow worse than all the insults. There were moments, quiet, fleeting moments, when I wondered if I was being used. If maybe, just maybe, They weren't as helpless as they pretended to be. But then guilt would crush me. What kind of daughter thinks like that? What kind of person doubts their own family? So I buried those thoughts deep down and kept giving. Looking back now, I realize how much of myself I lost in those years. I stopped buying things I wanted. I stopped traveling, stopped dating seriously, stopped living for myself. My life revolved around making sure the bills were paid and my parents were comfortable. I told myself, it's temporary. One day, things will get better. One day, they'll see how much I've done for them. But that day never came. Instead, the more I gave, the less they respected me. My father would mock me in front of relatives, joking that I was still living at home like a teenager. My mother would tell her friends how ungrateful I was whenever I tried to set boundaries. And slowly, I began to realize something that terrified me. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was a resource, a bank account, a safety net, a convenient solution to their problems. And the scariest part? I let them. That was my life leading up to that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, the night everything shattered, the night they showed their true colors. But before that, I was still living under the illusion that love meant sacrifice. That family, no matter how flawed, deserved endless loyalty. I couldn't have been more wrong. Thanksgiving night was supposed to be a celebration. At least, that's what I told myself as I carried bags of groceries into the kitchen, my arms aching from the weight of it all. I had spent nearly 2 weeks' worth of pay on that dinner: turkey, stuffing, wine, pies from the bakery downtown. I wanted it to be special. I wanted, for once, to feel like we were a real family gathered around a table, thankful for each other. The house smelled like roasted garlic and butter when everyone sat down. My father poured himself an oversized glass of wine, my mother adjusted the scarf around her neck, and Lily took her usual seat across from me, giving me a small smile of gratitude. For a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. But then my father cleared his throat. He tapped his fork against his glass, silencing the chatter. His face was red from the wine, his grin too wide. "I have an announcement," he said, puffing up his chest like a king addressing his subjects. I set my fork down, waiting. He looked straight at me, and his words came out sharp, deliberate. "Ruby, it's time for you to leave this house. You're nothing but a leech." The room froze. My stomach dropped. I actually laughed nervously at first, convinced he was joking. But the silence that followed told me otherwise. No one looked at me, not even my mother. My sister's eyes flickered with panic, but she kept her head down. "A leech," I repeated, my voice trembling. "Dad, I pay for everything. The bills, the food, the—" "Exactly," he cut me off, sneering. "And it's pathetic. You think throwing money around makes you important? You're 28 years old, still living under my roof. People are starting to talk. You're embarrassing this family." My face burned. Embarrassing? I've been carrying this family for years. You haven't held a job in. "Enough!" he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. The wine glasses rattled. "You will pack your things and be gone before the end of the month. That's final." I looked at my mother, desperate for her to say something, anything. She lowered her gaze and adjusted her scarf again, refusing to meet my eyes. That was when I noticed something odd. The scarf wasn't just decorative, it was hiding a faint line along her neck, the kind you see after cosmetic surgery. It hit me like a punch to the chest. Medical expenses. That's what she had told me she needed money for. That's why I skipped meals some weeks to send extra cash. She hadn't been sick. She had been getting work done. I turned to her, my voice cracking. "Mom, was all of it a lie? The doctor's visits? The pain, the medicine, was it all fake?" She flinched, then said softly, "You wouldn't understand. I did it for myself. For us. For us. My father laughed bitterly. Don't act so shocked, Ruby. You're naive. Always have been. And while you're so busy playing hero, maybe you should know something else. I've been saving. Putting money aside for something that actually matters. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. A fishing boat. Something real men invest in. Not wasting everything on bills and handouts. I felt like I couldn't breathe. All those late nights at the office, all those extra shifts I worked, everything I gave up so they could live comfortably, reduced to this. A facelift and a boat. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them see me break. So that's it, I whispered. You used me until you didn't need me anymore. And now you're throwing me out like trash. My father's smile widened. Finally, she gets it. The rest of the dinner was a blur. I couldn't eat. My hands shook as I sat there, staring at the food I had paid for, surrounded by people who had plotted against me. Even Lily, though I knew she didn't agree, stayed quiet. And I couldn't blame her. Speaking up would only make her the next target. Afterward, I locked myself in my room. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. My chest ached with betrayal, shame, and rage all tangled together. I had given them everything. My 20s were gone, swallowed by responsibility I never asked for. And in return, they branded me a parasite. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's voice echoing, "You're nothing but a leech." The next morning, I overheard them in the kitchen. My father was humming, already flipping through boat catalogs. My mother was on the phone with a friend, bragging about her new look. Neither of them mentioned me. Neither of them cared. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The grief was still there, heavy and suffocating, but beneath it, something darker began to grow. A seed of resolve. If they wanted me gone, fine. But I wasn't leaving as the fool they thought I was. No, I would leave on my terms. And when I did, they would finally see what it meant to underestimate me. Because I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was the woman they betrayed, and I was going to make them regret it. The night after Thanksgiving, I left the house with nothing but a duffel bag of clothes and my laptop. My father had made it clear that I wasn't welcome, and I refused to give him the satisfaction of watching me beg to stay. My best friend, Hannah, opened her door without hesitation. She didn't even ask for an explanation. She just pulled me into a hug and said, "You can stay here as long as you need." At first, I was hollow, numb. I spent days curled up on her couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying that night over and over in my head. My father's smirk, my mother's silence, the way they plotted behind my back while I was working myself to exhaustion to keep them afloat. But grief has a strange way of transforming into something else when it simmers too long. Anger. And anger, when you sharpen it with purpose, becomes something far more dangerous. Determination. One morning, as I sat at Hannah's kitchen table nursing a cold cup of coffee, I made a decision. I was done being their victim. They thought they could cut me out of their lives after bleeding me dry? No, I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to take back my power and make them choke on the consequences of their greed. The first step was simple. Cut them off financially. I logged into every shared account we had. The utilities, the insurance, even the grocery delivery subscription, all of it was in my name. I canceled every single one, effective immediately. The next step was my bank account. For years, I had been transferring money into a joint account for emergencies. My father had access, of course, but it was still under my social security number. I closed it and moved every last cent into a brand new bank with tighter security. By the time the first of the month rolled around, my parents would wake up to overdue notices, disconnected services, and a fridge with no food delivery on the way. A small part of me felt guilty. Lily still lived there, after all, but she had her own bank card from her part-time job, and I knew she'd survive. This wasn't about her. It was about them. But I didn't stop there. I needed proof. Concrete, undeniable evidence of everything I had sacrificed, everything they had twisted to their advantage. So I started digging. I spent hours combing through old emails, downloading payment receipts, and printing bank statements that showed years of transactions. Rent checks, hospital bills, grocery charges, utility payments, all traced back to me. I highlighted every line, every dollar that had come from my account. I also kept the text messages, dozens of them. Messages from my mother begging for doctor's money, followed by her posting selfies with a new haircut and a suspiciously tighter jawline. Messages from my father insisting he needed a loan for gas, only to later send pictures of himself fishing with buddies. The deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became. They weren't just careless. They were deliberate. They had used me, lied to me, and mocked me for the very sacrifices that kept them afloat. I organized everything into folders, digital and physical. I labeled them neatly: utilities, medical, loans, evidence. Each folder was a weapon, a carefully sharpened blade I would wield when the time came. Still, revenge isn't just about exposure. It's about timing. About creating the perfect moment when the mask rips away and the truth detonates. I wanted them to feel the walls closing in slowly, to taste the fear of losing control. So I staged it carefully. Step 1. Financial suffocation. Let them feel the sting of reality when the lights went out, when the water stopped running, when the car insurance lapsed. Step 2. Social humiliation. My parents cared about appearances more than anything, so I planned to send copies of the evidence, not just to them, but to our relatives, neighbors, even members of their church group. Let everyone see who the parasite really was. Step 3. Legal protection. I wasn't going to let my father storm into Hannah's apartment and try to intimidate me, like I knew he would. I had already spoken to a lawyer about filing for a restraining order if necessary. One wrong move, and I'd have the law on my side. Every night, I sat at Hannah's desk, scribbling notes, mapping out scenarios like a general preparing for battle. What would I do if my father begged for forgiveness? What if my mother pretended to be sick again? What if they tried to turn the rest of the family against me? For every possible move they could make, I drafted a countermove. The strangest thing was how alive I felt. For the first time in years, I wasn't drowning under their demands. I wasn't exhausted from carrying their weight. I was focused, sharp, dangerous. One night, Hannah walked in on me surrounded by papers, my laptop screen glowing with spreadsheets of expenses. "Ruby," she said carefully, "you're really planning this out." I looked up at her, my eyes burning with resolve. They called me a leech. After everything I did. They want me gone? Fine. But I won't leave quietly. I'm going to make sure they never forget what happens when you betray someone who loved you. And I meant it. The girl who once sacrificed everything for her family was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who had nothing left to lose and every reason to fight back. I knew my parents well enough to predict their first move. Prideful as they were, they wouldn't let the family know they had been cut off. Instead, they'd scramble behind the scenes, convinced I'd eventually crawl back and fix everything. So I dangled just enough hope in front of them to keep them blind to the storm I was building. I texted my father a week after Thanksgiving. "I just need some time to think. Maybe I can help out again once things settle down." It was bait, and he took it instantly. His reply came within minutes. "Good. We knew you'd come around. Don't keep us waiting too long." What he didn't know was that I had already timed every bill's due date down to the hour. On the 1st of the month, the power company cut off their electricity. The house went dark. 2 days later, the water was shut off. By the end of the week, the insurance lapsed, and the car they loved to flaunt was suddenly illegal to drive. Their calls flooded my phone. missed calls, voicemails, messages laced with desperation that quickly turned to rage. I ignored them all. Every unanswered ring was another reminder. I wasn't their puppet anymore. But I wasn't just cutting them off, I was exposing them. I compiled neat packets of evidence and mailed them to every relative, uncles, aunts, cousins, even the pastor of their church. Each envelope contained receipts, bank statements, and copies of texts showing years of me covering their expenses. I wrote one simple note inside each packet. They called me a parasite. Here is the truth. The effect was immediate. Whispers started spreading through the family tree. My parents, once so proud of their reputation, found themselves dodging awkward questions at every gathering. Their carefully crafted image was cracking, and I was the one holding the hammer. But the real fireworks began when my father decided to confront me directly. One Saturday afternoon, while I was at Hannah's apartment working on my laptop, there was a violent pounding at the door. Hannah peeked through the peephole and hissed, "It's him. He looks furious." I braced myself as the pounding grew louder. "Ruby, open this damn door. You think you can humiliate me? You think you can walk away?" His voice was booming, laced with alcohol. Hannah whispered, "Should we call?" "Yes." I cut her off. "Now." Within minutes, red and blue lights flashed outside the window. Two officers pulled my father back as he shouted obscenities at me through the hallway. I stepped into view, my hands steady. "Officers," I said calmly, "I'd like to file a formal report. He's harassing me." The look on his face when they issued the warning, pure disbelief. He had expected me to cower. Instead, I stood tall behind the shield of the law. That was twist number one. Of course, my parents didn't stop there. A week later, my mother called me, her voice weak, trembling. "Ruby, I collapsed this morning. I'm not sure how much longer I have. Please, sweetheart, come see me before it's too late." For a moment, my chest tightened. Despite everything, part of me still wanted to believe her. But I remembered the scarf, the faint surgical line, the lies about her health. And I remembered the folder I had labeled medical. So instead of rushing to her side, I sent another wave of evidence. This time, it wasn't just to relatives, it went to the entire extended family group chat. Photos of her invoices from the cosmetic surgery clinic. Copies of her texts asking me for treatment money. And a simple caption, "This is what her sickness looked like." The chat exploded with responses. Shock, anger, condemnation. My mother tried to spin it, but the receipts spoke louder than her excuses. That was twist number two. Still, the final blow had to be public. It had to strip them of the last shred of control they clung to. So when my aunt invited the family to a reconciliation dinner, I knew it was the perfect stage. I walked into that living room armed with my final folder, Boat Fund. My parents were already there, stiff and defensive, eyes darting around nervously. Relatives filled the room, waiting for explanations. My father started first, his voice dripping with fake regret. "Ruby has been confused. She's going through a difficult time, and she's been spreading lies." I stood up, cutting him off. My voice was steady, clear. "Lies? Let's talk about lies, Dad." I opened the folder and held up the bank statements for everyone to see. While calling me a leech, he was stashing thousands of dollars away in a secret account. Not for bills. Not for family. For a fishing boat. While I worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on, he was saving for his hobby. Gasps filled the room. Eyes turned on him, full of disgust. His face turned crimson as he sputtered, That's none of your business." "Oh, it's everyone's business now," I said coldly. "Because you made it my business when you humiliated me in front of this family. You wanted the truth? Here it is." The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, the facade crumbled completely. My parents weren't victims. They weren't noble. They were greedy manipulators, exposed before the very people whose approval they craved most. That was twist number 3, and the moment I knew my revenge was complete. The living room was silent after I revealed the boat fund. Every pair of eyes drilled into my father, waiting for his defense. His face turned beet red as he slammed his hand against the arm of the chair. "This is ridiculous," he bellowed, his voice echoing off the walls. "She's twisting the truth. She's trying to destroy this family because she's bitter. You all know me. I've worked my whole life to provide." But his words fell flat. No one nodded in agreement. No sympathetic murmurs rose to cushion his ego. For the first time, his audience wasn't buying the performance. My aunt crossed her arms. "Worked your whole life? Ruby's bank statements tell a different story. She kept your house running while you stashed money for toys." My father's jaw clenched. He turned his glare on me, spitting venom. "You think you've won? You think this makes you better than us? You're ungrateful, Ruby. Ungrateful." But I no longer flinched. His anger was the same weapon he had used all my life, and tonight it was finally dull. The next morning, the police followed up on the harassment report. They informed me a formal restraining order could be filed. I didn't hesitate. Within days, the paperwork was official. My father could no longer come near me without facing arrest. It was the final chain breaking. I returned to the house one last time, not as a begging daughter, but as someone reclaiming what was rightfully hers. Hannah came with me, phone ready to record, just in case. My parents hovered in the kitchen, silent and seething, as I walked past them. I gathered my clothes, my photo albums, the car keys I had bought with my own paycheck. Every item felt like a piece of myself I was taking back. By the time I loaded the last box into my trunk, my father finally muttered, "Don't think you can come crawling back when this blows up in your face." I shut the trunk with a smile. "I won't." What I didn't expect was the sound of hurried footsteps behind me. It was my younger sister, clutching a duffel bag. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but her voice was steady. "I can't stay here anymore," she whispered. "Not after everything I've seen. Can I come with you?" For a moment, the hardened walls around my heart cracked. She had been silent through much of the chaos, but now I understood. She wasn't blind. She had been watching, absorbing, waiting for her chance. "Of course," I said, pulling her into a hug. "You don't have to live like this either." And just like that, the cycle of control my parents had built began to crumble faster than they could patch it together. Weeks passed, and the family grapevine carried the news like wildfire. My parents, once the proud hosts of every holiday, were now whispered about in tones of pity and ridicule. No more invitations came. No more neighbors stopped by. Without me, their bills piled up. The lights stayed off. The water stayed dry. Their kingdom was nothing but a hollow shell. As for me, my world was small but free. Hannah helped us move into a modest apartment, 2 bedrooms, thin walls, second-hand furniture. But it was ours. Ours to decorate, ours to laugh in, ours to fill with warmth no money could buy. When Thanksgiving rolled around again, I hosted my own dinner for the first time. The turkey was smaller, the dishes mismatched, the table wobbly. But the laughter was real. Hannah cracked jokes, my sister teased me about my cooking, and for once, I wasn't weighed down by the crushing burden of being the family's provider. I raised my glass, my chest swelling with something I hadn't felt in years. "Peace." "To freedom," I said softly. "To freedom," they echoed. That night, I understood revenge wasn't just about tearing my parents down. It was about building myself back up, piece by piece, on a foundation of truth rather than lies. And my parents, they were left to choke on the consequences of their greed and cruelty. No safety net. No adoring audience. No daughter to foot the bill. Just two bitter people, sitting in the dark house they once lorded over, realizing too late that they had gambled away the only person who ever truly cared. That was the true climax. Not their downfall, but my liberation. For the first time in my life, I was no longer their victim. I was Ruby. Independent, whole, and finally free. My story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming my worth. For years, I believed that sacrificing myself was love, that pouring everything I had into others would make me valuable in their eyes. But the truth is, love without respect is just exploitation. And sometimes, justice doesn't come from a courtroom. It comes from having the courage to cut ties with those who manipulate you, even if they share your blood. Yes, revenge brought me a sense of satisfaction. But more importantly, it gave me freedom. It restored my dignity. It showed me that I was capable of building a life that belonged to me, not one dictated by guilt, obligation, or control. If you're in a place where you feel drained, used, or silenced, I want you to remember this. You are not alone. You have every right to protect yourself, to say, enough, and to walk away from anyone who treats you like less than you are worth. Do you think I did the right thing by exposing the truth and severing ties with my family? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more powerful revenge stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.